Have you ever felt like your mind operates on a different frequency than everyone else's? There's a certain type of person who finds the world's usual volume a bit too loud. They aren't first to speak, they're first to observe. They'll watch shadows lengthen across an afternoon and think about impermanence. They consider their responses carefully, not from indecision, but because they're navigating a landscape of possibilities most never see. These are the profound thinkers, the ones for whom the internal dialogue is richer than any external conversation, the ones who can expand a single observation into a cosmos of contemplation. But if this is you, you know it's rarely simple, because having a deep mind isn't merely about intellect, it's about perception. It's about detecting the strata in experiences others merely skim past. It's both a profound capacity and a weight. To truly grasp the profound thinker, you must feel the pull between the universe within and the world outside. For many, endless analysis leads to chaos, but for the deep mind, to ponder is to exist. It's their method of digesting reality. They don't just observe a river, they consider its source, its relentless journey, the stones it smooths over epochs. They discover allegories in the everyday. A farewell becomes a study in transient connection. A shared glance contains unspoken narratives. Psychologically, these individuals exhibit high levels of self-reflection. They possess a natural inclination to examine not just events, but their own internal reactions to them. They are perpetually seeking significance, asking why, not to challenge, but because the question is essential. This connects to heightened activity in the brain's default network, which activates during inward focus, creativity, and recollection. So the cognitive landscape of a deep thinker is a constant, dynamic web of association and analysis.
Yet this very capability can create distance. While others engage, they are often witnessing. They note subtleties, they reflect before responding, and often the moment for speech has passed before they've finished sifting their thoughts, so they remain quiet. And that quiet is frequently misinterpreted as apathy, when in fact it is immersion. A profound thinker doesn't seek just to converse, they seek to comprehend. They long for exchanges with substance, ones that plunge beneath pleasantries into the realms of aspiration, dread, the very blueprint of human experience. Superficial talk drains them, because while many wade in the everyday, deep thinkers are explorers in the abyss of idea. But that depth has a cost. It can lead to cyclical thought. They revisit interactions, deconstruct phrases, ponder intentions, question their own impact. Their cognition becomes a reel of potential interpretations, not from lack of confidence, but because they perceive complexity in all things. Every decision resonates with potential meanings, every feeling has subterranean origins, and their mind won't rest until it feels it's reached a core truth. There's a psychological concept, metacognition, the act of observing your own thought processes. Most employ it sometimes. Profound thinkers inhabit it. It's as if they're perpetual spectators of their own mental theater, evaluating, reordering, seeking to decipher their own patterns. This grants immense self-knowledge, but also opens the door to self-critique. When you perceive everything acutely, you also view your own imperfections in stark relief. A deep thinker doesn't simply ask, "What is my goal?" They inquire, "What is the root of this goal? What history fuels it? What are the implications of its achievement or abandonment?" They scrutinize passion, purpose, anxiety, recollection, until these intangibles feel almost physical. But in this process, they can sometimes sacrifice the uncomplicated pleasure of mere experience. They forget that not all phenomena demand dissection. Some are meant simply to be lived. You'll often find them in solitude, not from loneliness, but because aloneness is their dialect. They require room to exhale, to sort through the tangled threads of cognition that others may not sense. They are individuals who can experience profoundly while outwardly seeming serene. Their feelings move like deep ocean currents, unseen but formidable. They may gaze from a train window, seemingly at nothing, while internally they're reconstructing a choice from years past, examining what it revealed about their evolving self. This isn't self-flagellation, it's cartography. They aren't judging their psyche so much as attempting to chart its terrain, to locate where each sentiment resides. This can make them seem separate from the immediate, when in fact they are attempting to perceive it from every conceivable vantage point. One compelling aspect is their tendency toward existential reflection. That's when you ponder not just your own path, but existence itself, time, meaning, ethics, sentience. Questions without clear resolutions. This distinguishes them from the chronic worrier. Anxiety frets about future events. Profound thinking interrogates the nature of reality. It's the distinction between apprehension and profound awareness. Yet here lies the paradox. The same intellect that discerns patterns everywhere can also construct phantoms. When you think deeply, you can link any concept to any other, and occasionally that web becomes a snare. They might imbue a silence with excessive significance, infer purpose where none was intended, or transform straightforward matters into philosophical knots. It's like possessing a lens of too high a magnification. You begin seeing details that weren't meant to be the focus. Still, it is this very depth that fuels extraordinary creativity. Many of history's great minds, thinkers, artists, scientists, possessed this quality. They perceived the hidden filaments linking concepts. They approached challenges from uniquely oblique angles. Because when your mind relentlessly pursues why, you eventually arrive at understandings others bypass. But contemporary culture doesn't always honor deep cognition. We inhabit a world that prizes velocity, output, and decisiveness. To pause and consider can appear as delay. Stillness can be misread as frailty. Nuance can seem like uncertainty. Consequently, profound thinkers often learn to conceal their depth, to navigate a society that operates at a tempo faster than their internal rhythm. They offer agreeable nods in discussions, even when their internal narrative diverges completely. They offer polite smiles while their consciousness voyages to distant realms. And when the social world falls quiet, that's when their authentic internal discourse begins. There's an isolation in such an interior life because they frequently yearn for kinship, but only of a genuine kind. And real kinship demands openness, but not everyone wishes to venture that far down. So they remain watchful, patiently observing until someone demonstrates a similar capacity for depth. Only then do they lower the drawbridge. And when they do, it isn't partial, it's complete. They'll share their apprehensions, their visions, the truths they hardly voice, because profound thinkers don't deal in half measures of the heart. Yet that openness can leave them exposed. When you perceive the world in gradients, you anticipate others do the same. You presume sincerity is the standard, but not everyone functions from that place of depth. So when reality clashes with their layered expectations, the impact is magnified, not due to fragility, but because they've invested so much significance in the interaction. To them, a minor breach of trust feels monumental. A brief, genuine kindness can feel redemptive. Everything carries weight. And this is the duality. For the deep mind, every notion is vibrant. Every sensation reverberates. They cannot easily anesthetize themselves, even when they wish to. They sense the gravity of overlooked things, the subtle evasion in a crowd, the melancholy echo after laughter subsides, the promises made with one eye on the horizon. They don't just witness what is, they glimpse the ghosts of what might have been. Psychologists reference depth of processing, the inclination to encode memories with rich semantic and emotional context. This means when profound thinkers recall an event, they don't just retrieve data, they relive the associated atmosphere, its symbolism, its latent meanings. So they carry reminiscences not as snapshots, but as entire emotional habitats. This is why nostalgia affects them so powerfully. A scent can transport them to a former self that has long since dissolved. But this is not mere sentimentalism, it's neural architecture. Research suggests those prone to reflective and abstract thought exhibit stronger connectivity between the brain's emotional and analytical regions. They literally feel and reason in concert. That's why they can't simply switch off their stream of consciousness. Their emotions are interlaced with their logic. To them, to feel is to process, and this can lead to misunderstanding. People may label them aloof or intense or overly complex, but what they truly are is perceptive. They discern the hidden frameworks beneath the surface, how anxiety often masquerades as irritation, how affection can be shielded by arrogance, how individuals externalize what they cannot internalize. And once you see with such clarity, you cannot unsee. It becomes challenging to accept simplicity when you've grasped the underlying intricacy. Profound thinkers often find being in the moment a struggle, not from disinterest, but because their consciousness inhabits multiple timelines simultaneously. They re-examine the past, interpret the present, and envision myriad potential futures. It's draining, yet it's also magnificent, for it allows them to perceive potential where others see finality. They can extract meaning from hardship, and that forges a unique resilience. Because to a deep thinker, even suffering is instructive. It informs them about their own nature, about the world, about truth. But perhaps the most challenging lesson for the deep mind is learning when to cease inquiry, when to release the compulsive need to decipher everything, when to accept that some mysteries remain unresolved, for now. Because meaning, no matter how fervently we pursue it, is often something we construct, not something we unearth. And therein lies the quiet revelation. The very consciousness that searches endlessly for answers ultimately discovers that serenity lies not in resolution, but in attentive being. It's found sitting under a vast, unexplained sky that still feels boundless. It's in learning to dwell comfortably with uncertainty and still feel whole. Because maybe the ultimate stage of profound thinking isn't knowing more, but requiring less. Not dissecting existence into particles, but comprehending that depth isn't about sinking beneath thought. It's about achieving the clarity to rise with it. You can often identify a deep thinker not by their speech, but by the intervals within it. That moment of silence before they contribute, where their mind is refining through strata of consideration, isn't uncertainty, it's curation. They are seeking the most authentic expression of their insight, because language holds weight for them. They grasp how words shape perception, how a phrase can mend or fracture. Thus they speak with intention, sometimes too much, which can be mistaken for reticence. But the reality is they are auditing everything, the cadence, the implication, the quiet between statements. For them, communication transcends the spoken, it encompasses the sensed. Psychologically, this acute awareness ties to elevated empathy and pattern detection. They are continually interpreting emotional data. They notice fleeting expressions, slight vocal inflections, minor energy shifts that betray unspoken sentiments. That's why they can often intuit distress before it's voiced. It's not psychic, it's profound attentiveness. Yet this cognitive style has an ironic consequence. When you can perceive through facades, it's difficult to partake in pretense. You start seeing misalignments between words and actions, between cultural ideals and hidden pains, between the chase of an ideal and the reality of the human condition. Once this clarity dawns, it transforms your relationship with the world. The craving for surface-level approval diminishes. The hunger for authenticity grows. That's why profound thinkers are frequently pulled toward art, literature, philosophy, or quiet reflection, not to escape life, but to engage with it more fully. They require environments where their consciousness can expand without constraint. They find solace in narratives, in music, in extended walks where ideas can unspool naturally. They may speak sparingly, but when they do, it's to ignite something. They prefer dialogues that leave a lasting imprint, concepts that endure long after the conversation ends.
But despite their perceptiveness, they grapple with a fundamental challenge: cognitive saturation. Their mental processes don't have an off switch. It's akin to tuning into multiple channels simultaneously, each broadcasting a different stream of memory, hypothesis, and query. Even in attempts to rest, the brain persists in reviewing, revising, forecasting. And where many might seek distraction in external noise, profound thinkers can be overwhelmed by silence, because silence amplifies the internal cacophony. This often leads to rumination, the repetitive cycling around issues, emotions, or perceived errors. For many deep thinkers, it's not negativity, it's a pursuit of synthesis. Their mind seeks closure, seeks to reconcile contradictions, seeks coherence. But not every paradox has a neat solution. Accepting this may be among their most vital lessons. There's a famous philosophical assertion, "I think, therefore I am." For a profound thinker, this is both foundational and potentially burdensome. Thinking verifies their being, yet it can also engulf it. They can ponder themselves into confines, analyzing connection until it feels transactional, studying awe until it becomes predictable. They can understand so much about emotion that they momentarily forget to inhabit it. Sometimes the most arduous task for a deep mind is to just live an experience without immediately deconstructing it. But when they find that equilibrium, when they allow thought to illuminate feeling rather than substitute for it, they become remarkable. Because profound thinkers, at their best, are integrators. They merge reason with compassion, insight with instinct. They can analyze hurt and still extend gentleness toward it. They can see the fractures in humankind and still elect to believe in it. That is uncommon. That is wisdom beyond mere cleverness. A deep thinker doesn't categorize people as simply virtuous or flawed. They perceive them as narratives in progress. They understand everyone is sculpted by invisible struggles, by experiences that leave marks not on the skin, but on the soul. Thus, they may forgive readily, but they seldom forget naively. They might release individuals, but they retain the lessons quietly, turning them over in the mind like ancient talismans. If you've ever wondered why they often seem tinged with a gentle solemnity, it's not depression, it's recognition. It's the understanding that brilliance and ephemerality are forever paired, that everything cherished is in a state of gentle transformation. It's the acknowledgement that delight and sorrow are harmonies in the same composition. To sense both concurrently is part of being profoundly awake.
Psychologists term this emotional complexity, the capacity to hold multiple, seemingly contradictory feelings at once. It's not confusion, it's expanded capability. Profound thinkers don't hastily brand emotions as positive or negative, they regard them as intelligence. Anxiety signals what is significant. Grief unveils what was loved. Joy highlights what is precious. To them, every internal signal carries a message, if one learns to listen. But here's something often overlooked. They aren't perpetually somber. In fact, some of the most witty people are deep thinkers. Because when you comprehend life's inherent absurdities, humor becomes a sophisticated lens. They laugh not from ignorance, but from seeing the delicate, chaotic tapestry of existence and choosing a response of lightness. They know sometimes the most rational reaction to an irrational world is an acknowledging smile. Still, they frequently feel misread. They can appear detached or enigmatic when, in truth, they are submerged in processing. They aren't disregarding you, they are analyzing the strata of your statement, probing for intent, undertone, emotional subtext. They don't converse to dominate, they converse to connect. And when that connection feels unattainable, they withdraw, not from arrogance, but from self-preservation. Because the core truth is this: profound thinkers experience intensely. They may project calm, but internally, sentiments can swirl like a riptide beneath a placid surface. They detect dissonance in a space, note when an expression isn't congruent, feel the density of unspoken words. And that sensitivity, while a gift, can also overwhelm. They absorb ambient emotional data. They resonate with energies not their own. That's why they frequently need isolation to recalibrate, to shed the accumulated psychic weight of the world. Alone, they restore. They write, they ponder, they gaze into middle distance, thinking of all and nothing. In that stillness, they reconnect with their core. It isn't loneliness, it's replenishment. For a profound thinker, solitude is the habitat of lucidity. It's where the static fades and they can finally attend to the quiet voice within. Yet, profound thought without an anchor can become a vortex. So the most grounded deep thinkers learn to tether themselves to the tangible. They cultivate practices, mindfulness, creative acts, contribution that bridge their inner cosmos to the outer world. Because without expression, contemplation becomes a burden. They learn to translate reflection into something concrete, an image, a line of poetry, a transformative dialogue. They realize the goal of thinking isn't to retreat from life, but to deepen its color and texture. One of the most striking traits of the deep mind is its resistance to superficial acceptance. They interrogate conventions, systems, and inherited beliefs. While this might seem oppositional, it's actually born of a deep care for integrity. They care enough to ask, does this still hold value? Is there a more authentic path? Their inquisitiveness is an active devotion to truth. And yet, this same inquisitive nature can complicate existence. When you habitually see multiple sides, choosing a rigid stance becomes difficult. You comprehend myriad motivations, and therefore you feel a spectrum of responses. You see how wounded people cause wounding, how rarely anything is purely black or white. Suddenly, the world feels too nuanced for dogmatic answers. This is the weight of deep empathy. It renders simplistic judgment obsolete. And it's why profound thinkers can feel adrift in a culture that often prefers bold certainty over nuanced truth. But that is precisely what makes them essential. In an era of instant takes, profound thinkers pause, not from indifference, but from too much care to speak without consideration. They understand that some of the most important things worth saying require the patience to be discovered. And if you see yourself in this, you are not alone, and your way of processing the world is not a flaw, it is a distinct form of consciousness. If this resonated with you, please like this video. It helps support this channel, Winds of Thought, and tells us you'd like more explorations into the inner landscapes of the mind. Thank you for thinking deeply with us today.